You're 37 years old, making good money, but there's always zero left at the end of the month. Or maybe you're the opposite, you have money saved, but you feel guilty every time you spend something on yourself. What if I told you that both situations aren't about lack of discipline or financial education, but about something that happened when you were 6 years old? In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly where your dysfunctional relationship with money began, and at the end, you'll take a test that will reveal which financial trauma is controlling your life without you realizing it. Before we start, I want you to do a quick exercise with me. Close your eyes for 3 seconds and complete this sentence in your head: rich people are. Now complete this other one: I don't deserve money because. Hold on to those answers. They didn't come from your rational adult mind. They came from something much deeper, and that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. Let me tell you about Marina. She came to me completely desperate after discovering she had $32,000 in credit card debt. Detail: she was making $8,000 a month. How does someone with stable income accumulate this kind of debt? Her first reaction was, I'm irresponsible, I have no control. But when we started digging deeper, we discovered something devastating. Her mother had died when she was 10 years old. And the strongest memory she had of her mother was of a day when they went to the mall together, and her mom bought her a blue dress that she loved. She remembered her mother's smile, how special she felt, how perfect that moment was. 3 months later, her mother died. You know what Marina did every time she felt lonely or sad? She bought things. Not because she needed them, but because, unconsciously, she was trying to recreate that feeling of connection, of love, of being cared for. Each purchase was a desperate attempt to go back to that mall with her mother. She wasn't buying products. She was buying a hug she would never receive again. And this is what most financial experts don't understand. They think the problem is spreadsheets, tracking apps, financial education. But it's not. The problem is that we don't have a relationship with money. We have a relationship with the emotions that money represents. And those emotions were programmed decades ago, when you were too small to understand what was happening. There's a concept in financial psychology called money scripts. They're unconscious beliefs about money that you absorbed before the age of 7, mainly by observing your parents or caregivers. And here's the crucial point: these beliefs aren't rational, they're not logical, and most of the time, they're not even true. But they control every financial decision you make. I'm going to give you 4 main categories of money scripts, and I want you to pay attention to which one gives you that pit in your stomach, because that's yours. The first is money avoidance. People with this script believe, deep down, that money is dirty, that rich people are bad, that it's nobler to be poor. If you grew up hearing phrases like, money doesn't bring happiness, the rich won't go to heaven, we may not have money, but we have dignity, you probably developed this script. And the practical result? You unconsciously sabotage any opportunity to earn more. You charge less than the market rate. You feel uncomfortable when you have money in your account. You even donate or spend it quickly to get rid of that feeling of moral filth. I worked with a client who earned very well as a freelance designer, but every end of year he had an existential crisis and cut his prices in half. He rationalized it by saying he wanted to be more accessible, but the truth was he felt bad about earning more than his father. His father had been a factory worker his whole life, and in his unconscious, earning more than his father was a betrayal. It was like he was saying, I'm better than you. So he sabotaged himself to maintain family loyalty. The second script is money worship. People with this script believe that money is the solution to all problems, that more money will bring more happiness, that it's never enough. If you grew up in a home where money was scarce, where you saw your parents fighting over bills, where you couldn't do things your friends did because of lack of money, you may have developed this script. And the result? You work compulsively, you never feel secure no matter how much you have saved, you sacrifice relationships, health, important moments because you need to earn more. There's a frightening statistic: Studies show that people with this script have an average income 40% higher than the general population, but life satisfaction levels 25% lower. They achieved what they thought would solve everything, and discovered that the emotional hole is still there. Because the hole was never about money. It was about feeling safe, about proving worth, about compensating for the child who felt ashamed of not being able to have what others had. The third script is money status. Here the belief is that your value as a person is directly linked to your net worth. You are what you have. If you grew up in a family where there was constant comparison with neighbors, cousins, colleagues, where your performance was measured in material terms, you learned that love and approval come through visible achievements. And the result of this is devastating. You spend beyond what you can to keep up appearances. You buy an imported car financed over 8 years. You live in an apartment that consumes 60% of your income just because it's in the right neighborhood. You post vacation photos while your card is maxed out, because external validation has become more important than your real financial security. And here's something few people talk about: this script doesn't only affect those who came from families with money. Sometimes it affects more those who came from poverty and are desperate to prove they made it, that they're no longer that poor child. Money becomes a shield against the old identity you reject. The fourth script is money vigilance, hypervigilance with money. Here the belief is that money must be saved at all costs, that spending it is dangerous, that you always have to be prepared for the worst-case scenario. If you grew up in a family that went through major financial crises, that lost everything at some point, or that had constant instability, you developed this script as a survival mechanism. And it seems like the most healthy of the four, right? But it's not. Because the result is that you can't enjoy anything. You have money but don't take vacations. You deny small pleasures to yourself and those you love. You live in survival mode even when you're already secure. You can't celebrate achievements because you're already worried about the next crisis that may never come. I worked with a 53-year-old woman who had almost $1 million invested, but wore clothes with holes because they were still good. She worked 6 days a week even though she could retire. When I asked what all that money was for, she started crying and said she didn't know. She had spent her whole life accumulating as if she were building a wall between herself and the poverty she lived through in childhood. But the wall had become a prison. Now comes the part that will seem obvious, but that changes everything when you really internalize it. None of these scripts are about money. They're about the emotional needs that weren't met when you were a child. Money avoidance is about not feeling worthy of love. Money worship is about not feeling safe. Money status is about not feeling valuable. Money vigilance is about not feeling protected. And here's the cruel trick: when you try to solve an emotional problem with a financial solution, you enter an infinite loop. It's like being thirsty and trying to quench your thirst by eating. No matter how much you eat, the thirst continues, because you're addressing the wrong problem. So let me show you where, specifically, these scripts are born. Because it's not enough to know they exist. You need to identify the exact moment they were installed in your psychological operating system. There are 5 main sources of financial trauma. The first is scarcity in childhood. Not having enough, seeing your parents stressed about money, not being able to participate in activities that cost money, feeling shame because of clothes or school supplies. When a child lives through this, they don't think, "we're going through a difficult time." They think, "there's something wrong with me," or "the world isn't safe," or "I need to compensate for this when I grow up." The second source is abundance without affection. Having everything in material terms, but emotionally absent parents. The child learns that money substitutes for presence, that gifts compensate for absence. They develop the belief that love can be bought, and that if they have money, they don't need anything else. Or the opposite, they reject money because they associate it with the emotional coldness they experienced. The third source is using money as control or punishment. If you get good grades, I'll give you money. You don't deserve this because you didn't behave well. As long as you live under my roof, I control the money. The child learns that money is power, it's a weapon, it's manipulation. And they replicate this in adult life, using money to control partners, children, or being controlled by those who have more. The fourth source is secrecy or shame about money. Families where money wasn't talked about, where it was taboo, where there were secrets about debts or losses. The child internalizes that money is something dirty, dangerous, that the subject shouldn't be touched. And they become a financially illiterate adult not from lack of intelligence, but because they were conditioned not to look at it. The fifth source, and perhaps the most invisible, is behavioral modeling. You learned about money not from what they told you, but from what you observed. If your father worked 16 hours a day and died of a heart attack at 50, you learned that money costs your life. If your mother shopped compulsively when she was sad, you learned that shopping treats emotions. If your parents fought violently about money, you learned that money destroys relationships. And here's what nobody tells you: you don't need to have lived through a big trauma to have developed a dysfunctional script. Sometimes it was just a throwaway phrase you heard at 5 years old. We're not made of money. You think I'm a bank? The rich only get rich by exploiting the poor. Money doesn't grow on trees. It seems harmless, but for a child who's still forming their understanding of the world, this becomes absolute truth. Now I'm going to take you through the self-test I promised at the beginning. Get a piece of paper, or open your phone's notes. I'm going to ask 10 questions, and I want you to answer with complete honesty. No one will see this but you. And pay attention to the questions that make you uncomfortable, because discomfort is the GPS to trauma. First question: when you were a child, how did your parents react when you asked for money or something that cost money? Did they get irritated? Did they make you feel guilty? Did they give it without question? Did they negotiate? The answer to this question shows you whether you developed an association between asking and deserving. Second, do you remember the first time you felt shame related to money? It could have been something small, like not being able to buy a snack like your classmates, or not having the brand of clothes others had. If you remember a specific moment, that moment probably installed a script of, "I'm not enough." Third, did your parents talk openly about money, or was it a secret subject full of tension? If it was secret, you learned that money is something to be feared or hidden. If it was tense, you learned that money causes conflict. Fourth, have you caught yourself spending money to feel better after a bad day? If so, how often? If this is a pattern, you're using money as an emotional regulator, which means you never learned healthy ways to process negative emotions. Fifth, do you feel guilty when you spend money on yourself, even when you can afford it? If so, you have a script of, "I'm not worthy," and it probably comes from a childhood where your needs were secondary, or where there was scarcity and you internalized that you can't have. Sixth, do you hide purchases or financial decisions from your partner or family? If so, there's shame associated with your behavior with money, and shame always points to an unresolved trauma. No one hides what they feel at peace doing. Seventh, when you look at your bank account, what's the strongest emotion? Anxiety? Pride? Fear? Shame? Anger? The dominant emotion shows you which script is running in the background. Anxiety points to vigilance. Shame to avoidance. Excessive pride to status. Fear to unresolved childhood insecurity. Eighth, can you enjoy the money you have, or do you always live preparing for a future disaster? If it's the second, you're living in survival mode installed in childhood, even if your current reality is completely different. Ninth, what phrase about money did you hear most growing up? Write it literally. Money doesn't grow on trees. The rich are thieves. We're poor but honest. Money buys happiness. This phrase, which seemed innocent, probably became a self-fulfilling prophecy in your life. 10th and last, if tomorrow you won $10 million, what would be your biggest fear? The real answer, not the right one. Some people would be afraid of losing friends. Others of not knowing how to manage it and losing everything. Others of becoming a target. Others of not deserving it. This answer shows you the deepest belief you have about money and about yourself. Now look at your answers. Is there a pattern? Is there a recurring theme? This theme is your dominant script, and it's been controlling your financial decisions for decades without you realizing it. But understanding the script isn't enough. You need to do something that's extremely uncomfortable. You need to feel the emotion behind it. Because the script is just the shell. The emotion is the core. Let me explain how it works. Let's say you discovered you have a money avoidance script. You charge below market rate, you feel uncomfortable when you have money, you sabotage growth opportunities. You can even understand rationally that this comes from your childhood, that your parents demonized the rich, that you associated money with evil. But this intellectual understanding alone doesn't change anything. Because the script is running in the limbic system, in the emotional part of the brain, not the rational part. So what you need to do is this: the next time you have an opportunity to earn more and feel that discomfort, that voice that says, "It's not right," I want you to stop. Don't react. Don't run away. Sit with that sensation. Close your eyes and ask it, when was the first time I felt this? And let your mind wander. You might remember a specific moment. You might just feel an abstract emotion. But what you need to do is validate that child who felt that. You need to tell them, "I understand why you learned this. In that context, it made sense. But now we're safe. And we deserve to have enough." Does it sound like cheap self-help therapy? Maybe. But there's an enormous amount of neuroscience research showing that when you access the emotional memory associated with a behavioral pattern and bring compassionate awareness to it, you literally rewire neural circuits. You create a new pathway. And with repetition, this new pathway becomes automatic. The work isn't to erase the trauma. You can't. What happened, happened. The work is to create a new response to it. It's to teach that childlike part of you that's still afraid, or angry, or ashamed, that there's another way to deal with money that isn't through that old script. And here's something crucial that few financial therapists talk about: you can't do this alone if the trauma is deep. Just like Marina that I told you about at the beginning, who was buying to compensate for her mother's death, wasn't going to solve this with an Excel spreadsheet. She needed real therapy, to process the grief that was never processed, to find healthy ways to connect with that memory without needing to destroy her financial life in the process. So if you listened to this video and felt that something here touched you too deeply, that it's not just, "Oh, I overspend sometimes," but it's something that's destroying your life, relationships, mental health, please, seek professional help. Look for a therapist who understands the intersection between psychology and finance. There's an entire field called financial therapy that's dedicated to this. Now, I'm going to give you 3 practical steps you can start implementing today, even without formal therapy. Step 1. Create an emotional financial journal. It's not about tracking expenses. It's about tracking what you were feeling before each significant financial decision. Bought something expensive? Write down, what were you feeling 10 minutes before? Turned down a raise? What were you feeling when you refused? After a month, you'll see very clear patterns. You'll see that you always spend when you're anxious, or that you always sabotage yourself when you're close to success. This awareness is the first step to change. Step 2. Identify your financial triggers and create a space between the trigger and the response. Example, you know that whenever you feel lonely, you shop. So when that feeling of loneliness comes, you're not going to immediately go to the shopping website. You're going to do something else first. It could be walking for 10 minutes, it could be calling a friend, it could be writing on paper what you're feeling. The idea is to break the automatism. It's to create awareness between the stimulus and the response. Because once you create that space, you have choice. And choice is power. Step 3. Rewrite your money narrative. Literally. Take those phrases you heard in childhood and rewrite them. If you heard, money doesn't bring happiness, rewrite it to, money is a tool that, used consciously, can support my happiness and my values. If you heard, the rich are thieves, rewrite it to, wealth can be built with integrity and can be used for good. It doesn't matter if you completely believe these phrases yet. What matters is that you start planting seeds of new beliefs. And with time, with evidence, with action, these new beliefs start to gain strength. And here's the liberating truth: you are not your beliefs about money. You are not the script that was installed in you when you were 5 years old and had no defense, no ability to question, no choice. That was done to you, not by you. But now you're an adult. You have awareness. You have choice. And you can rewrite the story. Your trauma with money doesn't define who you are. It defines where you came from. And understanding where you came from gives you the map to where you want to go. Most people spend their lives fighting against destructive financial behaviors without ever understanding that it's not about willpower, it's not about discipline, it's not about being better. It's about healing an old wound that was never seen, never named, never treated. Today you saw it. You named it. And that alone is already 50% of the healing work. The other 50% will require time, patience, self-compassion, and probably some relapses. Because you'll have days when you'll fall into the old pattern. And on those days, instead of punishing yourself, instead of thinking, I'm a failure, I want you to remember, this is just the old script trying to run. It's not you. And now that you know that, you can choose not to obey it. If this video impacted you, if you finally understood something about yourself that had never made sense before, leave a comment telling me what your biggest insight was. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it. Because most people are stuck financially not from lack of technical knowledge, but from wounds that no one taught them to heal. And the more people understand this, the more people will finally be able to have a healthy relationship with money, which is a healthy relationship with themselves.